Здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги. Мы
Good morning, esteemed colleagues. We are starting our program today. We are opening our 5th annual International Symposium, City and Education. We are holding it for the 5th time already. And we are glad that every year we are gathering a very good spectators, international and Russian ones. And so today we're going to have an opening for the 5th time, as I have mentioned. So our symposium is held in the mixed hybrid format, so partially it would be online and partially it would be here offline in our building. And of course, that will all be broadcasted online. So we would like to invite for the first speech the rector of our university, Mr. Rimorenko. So good morning, esteemed colleagues. We are very glad to see you all at our today's 5th symposium. We can't say that is a jubilee symposium, but that is still very important for us. Several years ago, we have started discussing the topic of the city and its role and its problematics on which we are working in our university, and its most broad context, like the city is kind of a specific space which is the possibility for people to meet and to require something new which is not proposed by any other space. That is to say that the city in some sense is a very specific place which has for centuries been a meeting point for the enrichment of the social environment. And that is our 5th conference, which is very dear for us. And here we would like to welcome all the people who have joined us and those who have joined us for the first time. So we would be very glad if you would see something interesting for you here and that you would join our following meetings.
Maybe I would like to say for our overseas participant, we are very happy to see all you here. And we would like to say that it's so important thing that this crisis period we can discuss these very important topics here and build common meanings in our society. If we are talking about city development, if we are talking about education, culture, and other spheres of cities development. Еще раз хочу поприветствовать всех наших участников.
So once again, we would like to welcome all our participants and say that we are extremely glad to see everyone, all new senses, all new reports that are being pronounced here. I looked through the reports that are supposed to be discussed today during our conference, and I guess that we are starting to find new problems, new goals. As far as all our previous meetings, we have been discussing like how universities and cities and various spheres of the cities and various communities of the cities might cooperate. But today, I suppose, we have come to an era which previous that such a cooperation would be a new possibility to find new problems, the solution for which would be the one that is produced by our researches, which are important for the city development. I see that many reports of this symposium will be dedicated to the cooperation of education and culture, education and museums, educations and libraries, education and various exhibitions, various institutions of culture. And I suppose that the time has come to discuss that such a cooperation would include into our agenda the question of balance of what the culture passes, of what it has managed to treasure. And of course, that is the feeling of something new that allows us to cooperate in between various social institutions, between education that has primarily been thought as an institution of passage of this transfer of cultural experience and of the mass projects that exist in cultural institutions, where we try to find that new, that prospect, that something that we feel just at the tips of our fingers, that makes us think what are the new senses, what are the new ideas that appear when people get into that cultural space, where they feel that culture is a certain process of development. And I guess that now we are starting to see that cooperation of education and culture is not just the transfer of some cultural baggage or inheritance, but kind of a development of renewment of our attitudes and approaches that a person has when he or she gets into a cultural space. We're discussing what happens to the young generation. We see there are certain topics that are the most important, the most vital for the youth. So that is ecology and healthcare. And of course, I think, yeah, the healthcare is the most important thing. So we're not talking about medicine, we're talking about a lifestyle when people take care of themselves, of their health, when they think of their environment, of how they feel at the city space. When people make some steps that would allow them to develop their lifestyle, to enrich it, to make it more intense, and, you know, to get more from their life. I suppose that health and, you know, environment are the topics that are of center of the interest of the youth, and that's what they have been discussing considering the city development. And we see the rise of a lot of initiatives, and that's a very important trend which is being shown at our conference. So what we see are the traditional educational categories and notions. We see the transformation of socialization. Before, we have seen it as a set of norms that the elder generation passes to the youth. But considering the topics that we're going to discuss today, we see that this socialization has become a topic of co-creation, of mutual agreement on of different generations, like where the young can create their own socializing space, as far as some spaces of the cities are being renewed by them. They provoke the city business and city services to develop these spaces, and some of them are not even noticed for them, which are of more importance for the elder generation and their socializing. Where is this border? Where is that front line? Why some socializing places become more important considering the services and the business, and some spaces become less relevant, less interesting. And so what are the trends considering it become possible? We suppose that it influences various spheres of city life, like the professional orientation, public changes. So it's not about profession really, but that is the trend of the world which is changing rapidly, which is changing constantly. We have seen lately that the recent years have shown that profession have pushed several digital services development, everything that considers digital services, and digital spaces is being enriched. That has become a very important part of the city life. So a citizen actually uses daily digital services. We're discussing always that our university accepts students that demand us new digital services just because they're not even used to other ways, other services where the automatization doesn't exist yet. They don't know what queues are. They are not ready to gather a lot of documents and to visit several services to achieve the result. They understand that certain procedures which are routine for the elder generation and are habitual for them, they will just seem crazy for them. And the discussion of the digital services of the cities make routines easier, and they help us to conserve and to save some time for self-realization, for creativity. And I guess that is a very interesting part of the discussion of our symposium today. Educational system for those who work in it should see that the framework of the results is important for us. And of course, that is explained that today we're talking about the skills needed at the 21st century, like where are the pillars, what are the milestones for which we are searching for cooperation with cultural institutions, healthcare institutions, social care institutions. And what I see is that the discussion of transformation of educational results, of competences and skills of the 21st century, that is a very bright characteristic of our today's symposium. And what I guess is that it makes us think what is the new urbanization model, what is our new understanding, and what is the system of the description of the city space in urban space, and what is changing in these fundamentals. And of course, like the creation of the city sphere, and see the participation of city communities and the renewal of new architectural objects, like where the young people's role, can be seen. Like we're working with the elderly at our university, and we see how the city changes within different generations and different city communities. And of course, for universities, it's important to see its role in all these processes. University constantly renews the city. We're talking about the self-learning, self-educational possibilities. We are quite shy and modest considering our place, but we hope that universities will be able to take their role, their part. And we hope that each university will have the city university program, like the university, which is the participant, which is the gardener of the city, which means that the university's transformation is one of the characteristics as far as we have formulated our symposium's format. That's not the all-comprising list of all the topics and problems that will be discussed in our reports today. And I think that we will all have and get the feeling of something new and interesting. So I wish all the participants to get that feeling and to admire the idea that we will meet each other a lot of times in future, and we will manage to see what we are doing well, what should be worked on, and what are the new prospects that are waiting for us. Thank you. So thank you, Ingrid, for your inspiring speech. And I'd like to pass the floor to Svetlana Vachkova, Director of the Institute for the Urbanism and Global Education of Moscow State Pedagogical University. Thank you, Igor, so much. Good morning, good afternoon. I guess that we live in different time zones today, so maybe you will be watching us in recording. And I would like to mention that we are working for the 5th year already, and the topics are very different, and they vary from year to year. So now we're talking about the sustainable development. Then we have been discussing the cooperating projecting. Then for 2 years, we have been talking about the quality of education and quality of life. And of course, we have been talking about quality of life in the city and in modern cities. This year, we are going to talk about the realization of the third mission of universities, and there is the new mission of the universities where we are now, and we should see what we are able to do to realize that third mission. So we're talking about the 5th year of our work, and the very format of the symposium previews several changes. We have started with the students part, which was on 20th, 25th of May. We had the youth conference, prospects and challenges for the pedagogical career. And here what we see that our students and young researchers and teachers have participated. They were from various cities of the Russian Federation, of the Kyrgyzstan, of the Belarus, and of the Kazakhstan. We had roundtables, and we hope that this new format would become traditional, and that next year we will be holding the same youth conference, and we suppose that our first attempt was a success. So we will go on. So previously we have been including some student activities into the symposium, but they become more numerous, they require more time, and that is why we consider it to be kind of a self-reflection on what they want to do, what they are going to do, so that our students would have a productive cooperation with us. One more new amendment and change for the symposium was yesterday. That was a day when we have been holding a seminar of theater practices to universities and schools, and their teachers of the Moscow schools have been sharing their experience on integration of theater skills have been discussed. So how do we hold the meetings with parents with the theater pedagogy practices? I suppose that that is very interesting, and we should analyze it and see how this event passed, and we should see how do we enrich such a format. And of course, what we see is that the participants that will be talking today, people who will just listen our discussion, would be able to find for themselves sections and topics which would interest them. So we see that the topics and formats are so rich, so different, that people who are interested in the cities, in universities, in the cooperation between cities and universities will definitely find something precious for them. So even if this year you would be just, listening to us today, we hope that the next year you will already be participating in our discussion. So I wish you all fruitful work, some memorable meetings, so that they would be productive, considering in front of symposium, and that we will go on working. So good luck to us today.
Я хочу пригласить Ашота Сирановича Данумова, заместителя начальника управления международного сотрудничества Московского городского педагогического университета.
Да, добрый день, коллеги. Я рад вас приветствовать на нашем симпозиуме. Симпозиум уже стал традиционным мероприятием, которое мы проводим ежегодно в нашем университете. Немного, конечно, о прошлом симпозиуме, который стал для нас вызовом в связи с пандемийными ограничениями, но он прошел, конечно, успешно, и мы, как в прошлом симпозиуме, коллеги всегда заканчивали свои доклады, как я помню по прошлой повестке, что следующий симпозиум точно пройдет в очном режиме. И да, конечно, у нас пройдет симпозиум в очном режиме, в смешанном режиме. Это новый формат, который сейчас взаимодействует в университете. И что хочется отметить, что симпозиум прошлых лет стал некой площадкой, даже отправной точкой для крупных исследований, научных исследований, которые проходят в университете. Позволил привлечь зарубежных и российских партнеров для осуществления этих исследований. Я надеюсь, и даже уверен, что этот симпозиум не будет исключением, что научные проекты продолжат свою работу, коллаборации научные с зарубежными партнерами и с партнерами стран СНГ. И я уверен, что повестка симпозиума будет актуальна, и как каждый год, ежегодно повестка симпозиума связана с новыми вызовами в образовательной и городской среде. То, что говорил Игорь Михайлович и Светлана Николаевна. Надеюсь, что данный симпозиум будет плодотворный, и нас ждут 3 дня увлекательной работы с коллегами. Спасибо.
Thank you, dear colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Janumov. We have 5 minutes before we start our plenary session. Our first session is organized in a hybrid format. Some speakers will be offline in Sadova Samatochne Street. Some speakers will be connected online. I would like to remind you that according to our program, we organize a broadcast in YouTube. Our symposium will be broadcasted online, no matter whether they are organized offline or online. They are to be seen in our YouTube channels. You will be able to connect and watch, not only listen to our speakers, but you will be able to ask your questions. We have a chat available for comments and questions. We are following your questions, and we will ask your questions to the speakers, and we invite you to participate actively and to engage in our symposium, even if you are connected online via YouTube, being at home or at work. Thank you very much, colleagues, for this opportunity. And in 4 minutes, we will start our first plenary session. I wish you good luck.
Good morning. Good afternoon. We are starting our first activity. It will be organized in a hybrid format. Some speakers are present here offline. Some of our participants are connected online. One speaker is going to be online on our first plenary session. This is Nikita Rumiantsev, Analytical Center of Moscow Pedagogical University, Mr. Kupriyanov, Institute of Pedagogics and Psychology, and another speaker is from National Institute of Planning and Administration. It is Mayani Monica. She's a doctoral research scholar from India. We're going to talk about school socialization, about school communities. We are going to talk about how this is organized in the education sphere, and we're going to talk about research ecosystem in the universities. First topic is going to be the well-being of the children in modern cities. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to this symposium. We are proud to cooperate with your university. We organize trainings together and research. It's very interesting work, and this conference is very informative. And I saw that among the organizers, there are many friends of ours. On my behalf, I would like to organize you to a forum that we are organizing. And we invite you as speakers to our platform. I would like to switch on my presentation. And before I start, I would like to say some words about our center. Why do we do what we do? Urban health. So we have a forum which has been organized consecutively for 11 years. Urban health is the topic which came from the fact that there are very many changes, renovation, urbanistic restorations. We have many projects, and we not only are engaged in beautification, but also in economic projects, and those have an impact on our health. And we need to think about well-being of our citizens. We started thinking about this agenda. And there's a congress in the framework of our forum that we started. This congress is engaged in many projects, and I invite you to our website for more details. I'm going to talk about some projects that we carried out in Moscow. We work in Moscow, but not only in Moscow. But today I'm going to talk about connection of the changes in the city and the problems of health. For example, obesity. The initiative is called Cities That Fight Against Diabetes. Several capitals are engaged in projects of well-being. They fight against diabetes. Diabetes is a cause of obesity. And we organized an anthropological project which engage a community of people with diabetes. They share their experience of treatment, about their way of life, and so on. Also, there's another project of how cities implement projects for a healthier well-being, for a healthier lifestyle in the cities. We want to increase the well-being and decrease negative impact. Some renovation projects can take that into account and decrease negative effect on people's health. I would like to start with presuppositions and preconditions. First of all, first trend is aging of population. In a couple of dozens of years, we will live in the city where we will have less children than old people. That's one trend. Another trend is connected to the fact that the longevity changes. Children who are born now, they will live longer than our generation. It means that we need to prepare them for healthy and happy life, and we need to optimize the environment for this longer life. We organize some projects with Rospotrebnadzor. It's a surveillance organization which is engaged in population health. The same thing is observed in other cities in Russia. We live longer, and there are more and more elderly people. The whole world, Russia included, faces more and more the problem of obesity. BMI is growing. Malnutrition is the problem of the past. Many people now are overweight. In the US, we observe a pandemic of obesity. I mean, BMI is over 30 or 35. Over 30 is overweight. Over 35 is already obesity. Overweight is a marker of health. If we measure any community, we will see that average weight is a good metric to assess health, to assess a possibility of, to assess chances of certain diseases, and so on and so forth. So BMI is a good indication to assess population health. Another thing connected to obesity is that this trend will continue. The world will become more and more obese. Cities can acknowledge it, that there are more and more people with obesity. It is something that we observe, and it's a growing trend. We move less and we eat more. We gain, we earn more money, we afford more, we eat more, we eat junk food. We move less, and this is why we become overweight. And if we want to be prosperous, and we do want to be that, it's inevitable that we will get more and more overweight. Look at the slide. So here we can see the correlation between income and the percentage of population with obesity. In Russia, the trend is also observed. Population in Russia has a BMI above average, so it means that many people are overweight. 38 million people suffer from obesity. Tambov region is less impacted by this trend, but still. What is more important for our subject is the fact that 3 out of 5 people are overweight. And this dynamics of obesity and overweight is growing fast and even faster in children and teenagers. For 8 years, we have seen this growth up to 27.4% among children and 66.5% among teenagers. This is connected to the fact how parents eat, whether they eat healthy or not, because parents are role models for their children. And the physical activity is becoming less and less. So we observe this trend. Obesity in children is also a problem in big cities. We observe this problem in Moscow, New York, and Chicago. And you can see that in Moscow, this problem is observed. 7.3% of children are obese. And this trend is growing. Look at the trend. 1975, we had not many children suffering from obesity, but now this trend is growing. Look at the 2016. How big of a growth we observe, and we need to do something about it. We live longer, we are richer. But more than that, there are 2 negative effects. Multimorbidity is growing, so chronic diseases start appearing earlier in young people. Multimorbidity is when chronic illnesses are accumulated in one person. So you can see that on a graph, different colors, and the growth of the number of chronic diseases in young adults. It's true, people will live longer, but they will not be healthier. They will accumulate chronic diseases. And what we have to do about it, we need to reverse this trend. Let the people live longer, but let them live healthier. What kind of diseases become chronic? So these may be infectious diseases, COVID included, but more than that, it's diabetes, oncological diseases, cardiological diseases. If you suffer from cardiac disease, so the doctor will tell you that it's the result of your unhealthy lifestyle for a long period, and it's not possible to heal you completely from it. We can only correct and adjust your condition. Majority of these diseases are caused by obesity, dementia, esophagus cancer, kidney disease, kidney disorder, spine disorder, and so on and so forth. I'll reiterate that obesity is one of the main factors of healthcare costs. More than that, smoking causes these expenditures. 2 to 5% of GDP growth are lost due to these expenditures on healthcare connected to obesity and smoking. More than that, let's look at the cause of the obesity. First of all, it's balance of calorie intake and calorie burn.
But let's take a look at how modern science sees it. Actually, it's much more complicated. So even if you eat well and healthy, if you have a good calories burning, but you don't sleep regularly and you don't sleep well, then it means that, there will be a neighbor who will not let you sleep. You'll have a 30% more risk, to have problems with your health, and you will have 30% of high risk to have an obesity. So if you smoke, if you have any addictions, that is just the same thing. So like if you have some intestine problems, all that will be, one of the factors. So considering the evaluations, factors of the environment should also influence it, that is morphology, mobility, safety. So I'm going to discuss all that, but it has a direct influence on your weight and how often will you get it and how that would influence other illnesses. But right now we're talking about obesity. So considering the World Health Organization, all these factors are not considering the genes or healthcare accessibility, but that is lifestyle. That is Mary London University has proven that in the neighboring districts there's difference between. So if we consider only the factor of the lifestyle and environment, that would explain the 7-10 years of lifelong period. So you have various risk factors here. So considering it, we as urbanists are working on that. So as far as we are talking, as we are discussing, we are like projecting these scenarios of lifestyle, and they influence much more than just doctors do. Doctors can help with diagnostics and with preventive medicine, but considering the risk factors, these are people who are working in environment and to cooperate with them. So here I will just say a couple of words. So that is the modern design, where we would create a not pathogenic environment and illnesses, but that is the absolute genesis. And we suppose that that is the absolute model. There is the Association of the City Design, and they have been elaborating recommendations of this complicated model. So these are the modern fields, and they agreed with the objects, and these are the certain factors of environment that influence health, and we're trying to manipulate them and to achieve certain results. So we see that here are a lot of topics that we are working on. But obesity is of the most importance for us. And what we see here is that here are the three-dimensional things. So that is the administration, space, and money and time. So, for example, if we are changing the road surface, then we see that it changes the mortal rate, and here are the other costs that influence the city life. So we're not talking about the beautification of the urbanism, that we are doing decay or the quarry just because it's more beautiful. No, we are doing the city redirection so that it would have economical and healthcare consequences. Here we also see the connection that the health, the factor for which it's not the healthcare department who is responsible, everyone should be responsible for it. So that is the principle that has arrived from Finland, and in every country it is being accepted that all the departments should, have this evaluation. So all city construction solutions might be made just according to the healthcare issues. So we should bring the assessment of how the loneliness problems would change and all other healthcare thing, but still that is something that we should all be aware of. And so when we start talking about some spaces, we should understand that spaces are, very different use as far as people are heterogeneous, they are omnigeneous, and we are working with the young, with adolescents, with the elderly. The elderly are a more homogeneous group, but children are very small, they are toddlers, they are of high school, of primary school, of maternity, school age. And so what I would say is that, the consumption of the city services is changing. Like people who are of 35 years old, they consume the same things as the adolescents and the teens. So, the border, line of who is grown up already has changed. So we have different reference points, like small children would need to appeal to their parents, so school children after school, and teens are more using like the city, they have some pocket money, so let's construct actually what do children do, children up to 10 years. So that is the group which is of most important for us, considering diabetes and obesity. As far as we are talking about the norms, they should have 3 times per week high physical activities. 8% of them don't have it. I suppose that more don't have it at all. They should drink more than 3 liters per day, but in Moscow, people have dehydration as far as they drink less than 2 liters per day. So we have a stigmatization, we have poor health traditions. You know what is the fight considering stigmatization? That is the destigmatization within the doctors. As far as doctors have research that we are healing them, and he can't just change his lifestyle. And so all our work is in vain. So 60% of people consider that he who have a diagnosis either changes his life or not, while 60% of people do not change their diagnosis. As far as their habits are just too strong for them. They're not talking about the teens and about the grown-ups. And the main objects are here, where we can incorporate such solutions that is city space, and for the teens, we will discuss them a bit later, but considering our research,
смотрели на сценарии, как пользуются просто дети.
So considering the scenarios like children who are not overweight, like how can I lose calories, how can I move around?
И отдельно дети, имеющие уже ожирение. И важно понимать, что дети, уже имеющие ожирение,
So these are children who are already overweight and they have so much overweight that they have other scenarios of behavior. as far as they don't go to the physical education classes, like they are not willing to do that. Parents also don't want to push them to do it. So if you don't bring them to sports, you know, that would influence. Like the healthy children will not go there or will go. They are not eating correct food, and this is caused by their grandmas. So if you do something else, well, you know, children will still follow the same old habits, and they are usually ostracized as far as they don't play football and something like that. So that is one of the so that is not a homogeneous sphere. So there is a lot. I don't know how to work with this clicker. There are a lot of methods and approaches to projecting of the space. I can't find that slide really.
Есть довольно много разных подходов, эти вот просто так говорить. Наиболее популярно есть.
So there are a lot of approaches which are standard for projecting. There are standards of healthy street that is used in London and the US. And now what we see is that is the design that becomes popular that sees it as various scenarios of consumption, and we are maximizing healthy spheres and minimizing the unhealthy conditions. So if you have walked, if you have not smoked a cigarette, if you have talked to people, as far as you know, lonely people feel sick earlier, more often, and they die earlier. People with social contacts don't have that much problems, and they get diagnosed, you know, quicker. As far as others give them the hints on their looks and their behavior. And this approach is so much founded on the economy-based platform of the projected economy. So considering cognitive faults, we try to make people make correct traits. So we will not stop on that much. Yeah, we can discuss it for a lot of time. But these are various fields that are important. And so that is the elementary field. And in Russia, it's quite substantial. There are problems in America. There are alimentation deserts, like the city, you know, has so much slots that you can't put there a discounter with healthy food. And there, you know, you may never find fresh vegetables and fruits. We here, considering our construction tradition, we always have retailers, and we don't have elementary deserts. So this Moscow market program has been created not to have this food diversity, but to support local producers, but it still worked out. And so what we have been doing, we have been making the tourist appeal in city, but still we see that the temperature has become less for 1 or 2%, where we have passed innovative works. And now we see the number of the microparticles has diminished. And what I have seen, we have seen it only later. That's what we have been directed to. So these are the two approaches we have been willing to see. So here are the goals of active design of the projecting. That is the healthy choice. Here we should see the behavior roots and to see what are the people you get intended to. So children have various ideas and desires. So we have various purposes for the very same space. And here what we see is that we have guidelines which are very reflective considering New York and Singapore. And there, if you have hypermarkets or supermarkets that want to achieve a better price for the loan, they should see that there are transparent windows, that there should also always be fresh vegetables and fruit, so that people would consume that, and so that there will be nothing sugar consumption or cigarettes at the winning points, and that all healthy foods should be at the height of the 8-year-old child. That the child could see that and could take it. And such easy design solutions have a lot of effects. Let's discuss them. So we have outlined in our research several scales at which we would like to work on. So that is the city scale and with various routes, and it is a comfortable city. So considering if there is a child who follows them from the university, it's like when the child is going through the park 15 minutes, this child has 30% less stress, and he has a larger number of words he uses. He's less stressed, and if we have this effect of 2 or 3%, considering the 20 million agglomeration, that means that the number is huge and the effect is a large scale. Of course, there is a problem of accessibility of green zones, but in Moscow, the problem is quite solved. We see service models, we see the district scale, and we see this post-Soviet construction plan. And here we see the flows oriented, and we see that here are the fields which are empty. If you start the evaluation, you'll see there are a lot of people. And considering it, we see that the safety level goes down, and there is no social control, and then you don't let children in. And we see here that people, well, starting from 2014 or 2013, the families would better let child to go to the center than to their own district, as far as it seems more dangerous to them, even though it's not right. Well, maybe not everywhere, but averagely. And of course, there are certain recommendations considering the school level. Well, we'll take the next slide then. That here what we can see that is the creation of giant schools that would help us, but I'm not the specialist in school projecting, but I think that there we see a lot of children and flows of activities. Like if you're talking about gardening and planting vegetables, they are a good natural model for children and teens to get acquainted with vegetables, with food at all. Like you tell them how it works, how elementary processes work. They start working with hands. We see that that is a driver of socialization. And there is a huge problem of accessibility of food. At foods, everything is, quite standardized. But then teens, go to commercial centers, to food courts, which provokes a lot of risks. I'm not going to discuss that a lot. We will have a research published soon. So we are discussing urban interventions, but altogether they have a very good effect. And so considering these effects, so that is an example of the New York, and these are the American cities, like considering the design, considering people with diabetes, so they have the reduction of the risk factors from 11 to 31%, because the trespassing structure helps to economize the healthcare expenses. And of course, these are the effects that can be evaluated right now. We have been assessing them for some Moscow districts, And we see that the green zones are quite big in Moscow, so we don't have this problem. I guess that that's it for now. I will be ready to answer to your questions. And of course, I'm ready to share our materials. Thank you, Nikita. Igor, you had a problem. I don't see any questions in the chat. So please, yeah, thank you so much. Such an interesting report. I have two questions and which you can answer yes or no, I guess. Yeah, you know, we have some sound issues. I will keep working, and if you tell me when you will hear me well.
Can you hear me now? Well, here's what I was going to say. Well, thank you for your presentation. I have two questions. First, you mentioned the obesity problem. You mentioned obesity in children, and the cohort of children affected by obesity is big. So you mentioned from 0 to 14 years. And do you have a better fragmentation of ages of children who are obese? The second question about infrastructure. Well, in your presentation, is there a difference in the level of education? So you mentioned different districts of Chicago and other cities. So if you have carried out some research on that issue, can you share, please? Answer. The answer is sad. In Russia, we have very poor statistics. In the Association of Pediatrics, we have information about children up to 7 years of age, and we have data about teenagers, and we have also statistical data on the population overall. We have different sources of information about obesity and whether the person is overweight. There's military offices, army offices, and you know, young men go through medical check in these offices. So, but these data are close. Another thing that we have is overall health check that every person should undergo. And in this data, we can see information about health condition, but the weight in kilograms is not mentioned. There's only information about whether the person is obese or not. And these data are not very relevant, so we're trying to get more precise data, at least for Moscow. What about level of education, your second question? So we only considered cities, I mean geographic locations. But about the level of education, I cannot tell you, but we can draw a conclusion that this problem affects more people from poorer families. So there may be districts which are less prestigious, where manual workers live. And I suppose this is also a factor which influences the health condition. Well, health condition is not only defined by medical service, but by the way of life. There are articles on this subject. There are researchers who examine this problem of obesity in big cities. So I showed you on the slide there were two authors which are examining these issues. So feel free to go and check their articles. Question: I suppose the level of literacy is also a factor. Answer: you're right. Level of education is connected to the health. Yeah, the more the level of education, the better way of life, the better conditions of life of a person. Question: but what about the education itself? What about the specializations? So is there a research about obesity among different categories of people with the same education, with different specializations? Answer: there is a problem when we talk about obesity. The problem here is that when we deal with a disease, only doctors should provide these data. But more than that, we have school psychologists. They may observe things and they can also provide data. In Russian schools, we have a subject called security of lifestyle. But in this subject, we do not pay much attention on healthy lifestyle and on nutrition. We should, I think, however. Question: there may be different programs launched, but who is implementing them? I heard on the radio about one project. There's a college, and in this college, there was an announcement that pizza and sausages were not allowed to children under 18. So if you are older than 18, you can go and buy your pizza. But if you are underage, you should not eat it. So there was a regulation that sausages are not healthy for young children. And I ask you the question, who is in compliance with this regulation? Answer: so there is a tax for sugar. And it's profitable for companies to produce food with sugar. So it's another driver. Thank you for your presentation. And I hope to see your presentation published very soon. We will be happy to see you again on our symposium. Next presentation, please. Dear colleagues, I'm very happy to greet you here in our symposium. My topic appeared as a joke. Every joke has a serious part in it. Fast food restaurants of Moscow is a space for informal communication between teenagers. That's the topic. So it's true we need to tackle this issue if we are talking about teenagers, their well-being, and the way they eat. We usually try to impose rules and regulations and procedures on our teenagers. However, we often fail. Why do we fail? We impose good things, but in our approach, the comprehension of a teenager is missing. You know, a teenager is not learning how to live. The teenager is actually living. And we need to take into consideration actual trends. We try to create artificial worlds for our teenagers, but they fail. Our teenagers do not embrace these artificial worlds. We need to look at how teenagers actually live in the environment which is naturally created. We focused on the spaces which appear in fast food networks, in food courts and trade centers. So we try to watch the networking in these spaces between teenagers. And in this theory, we found different interesting aspects which may be helpful. First of all, what's the geography of the youth? That's a new trend, a new concept. A child has its own space where he or she lives, and this space geographically can be used. How do we use this space? How the child uses this space? So, geography of space with young children, with juniors is one thing, but with teenagers is a different thing. How a teenager perceives urban space. Teenagers live in their own local spaces, in their own districts, in their own neighborhoods. Their geography is well localized. The city should be friendly towards children and teenagers, towards people. Another thing that we haven't implemented yet, but it's a dream of ours, it's very meaningful. This is the idea it's an idea of McIntyre. Every epoch has its own concept of childhood. Childhood is an illness which should be treated as soon as possible, and the child should help parents in the field works and so on and so forth. Then there was another industrial concept of a child as an angel. A child is an immaculate creature. In that epoch, there was a special industry dedicated to children, children clothes, children toys, and so on and so forth. Think about Alice in Wonderland. Everything related to the adult world is mysterious and alien. It's puzzled. Another concept is referred to the 20th century and of its communism activity. Children and teenagers get involved into adults' activities. The child is not isolated from the society. No, the child lives in this society, but in a children's space, a little bit alienated from the whole world, but still acts in parallel. Let's look at what we have now. We don't have any similar to Soviet project, but we have different programs. What do we have now? We go back to Victorian epoch, when the child was considered as an angel. We focus on security for children. We want to prevent any threats, and we take too much care of our children. We overprotect them. So the social space for the children is like a cage. Put your child into a cage and all the problems will go past. But what is a realistic concept of childhood? I have an idea. The child should be educated as an author of his own project, as a start-upper. The child as a creator of his own business. Let's look at our teenagers in the city and let's find their activities. Let's give our teenagers a space for an active work, for creative activity, for collaboration. We say that teenagers are too childish, they are consumers, they are lazy. But do we create opportunities for them so that they do something, so they become more independent, so they invent things? Do we ensure a space, a productive space for them? Well, what about my project? So the environment of fast food spaces, food court spaces. Let's take these fast food restaurants and let's observe how the teenagers interact there. We sent a group of students there and they observed what was happening in the food courts. The observation was made during 169 hours. Then we organized interviews with teenagers about their previous experience. And we asked some teenagers, pupils of Moscow schools, we asked them questions. They were reluctant to answer, but still we got some data. First questions that we asked. Is this subject relevant? Majority of children, 75.8% of children, communicate with their peers in the food court. I'll remind you, these are students. We were wondering who were these teenagers in fast food restaurants, in food courts. These are students, young students. These are not only school graduates from Moscow schools, these are university students as well. We asked them, were you a good student in the last grade in the last school year, and 50% said, yes, I was an excellent student. 36% said I was a rather good student, and 7% said I was a satisfactory student, and 7% said no, I was a poor student, a very bad student. Another question, did you want to switch schools? Did you want to change schools? Go to another school? I'll remind you that food courts are attended by rather wealthy children, so middle-class children and teenagers. These are children who are rather doing well in their schools. And it's a normal thing. It's something natural to be present in the food court and to communicate with peers there. The other question is, what are they actually eating? Is this food healthy? Or is this food a cause of potential obesity? Another question is about the families that we observe in food courts. What about their families? And we have different categories. The majority, 85%, are the students coming from rather affluent families, wealthy or well-off families. 12% are really wealthy and really rich families. Well, in food courts, we do not find many poor children. Look at 23.4%. These are middle-class families, more or less affluent, so not poor, not rich. And the other question about the families is about the cultural capital. How many books does the family have?
So considering that the education of the parents, number of books they have at home, all that is very important. And I guess that considering the cultural capital, families have, quite a regular distribution. For example, we have quite highly educated people of high intellect. There are people who are quite modest considering their intellectual abilities, and some people don't have a lot of books and they are all about cooking. So considering the fast food points, we had 64 registration forms, and we have been seeing that like a student had a district which he had to walk around, and they had 4 or 5 places fast food. He had 2 hours to come there and to see and register what you have noticed there. And so what we see, we had 6 territories, and they are not, regularly distributed. We have north, we have south, we have east and west, and of course we have the center. So we have seen something like 980 teenage companies, and ballots had been only 816. So we have asked our students to make photos of them, without faces, really. So considering the block of like when did they come there, so the peak time when teenagers are at food courts then is from 6 to 8 p.m. Considering the monitoring, the most popular was Burger King. we see that the companies have been registered, which are not quite big. Here we see a certain head points for them, but considering the monitoring and the surveys, we see different results. We don't know what to understand here. The first place here is McDonald's. Like 89% said that they have spent their time there. What's more important is that Burger King, considering the first survey and considering the monitoring, gathered 40%. So you know that is kind of a very confident story. So we could have been discussing it considering the service. You see that the spots are the same. So here are the three main distributions, like that is McDonald's, KFC, and the Burger Kings, and food courts at commercial centers. Considering the companies, we see a number of participants of one group at a food court. We have kind of an idea, like when we are filming or photo shooting, we see quite a short period of time. Like you have spent just 15 minutes at a platform, certain place, but like, you know, there are people who come and who live. So considering the whole functioning of the group that stays to certain place, there are more people, but you can register just a small number of people, a small group. And what we see that there are people who are the same age who don't have age difference for more than 2 or 3 people. Like 73% are from one school. There are school children and those who have already graduated from it. You know, staying at a certain place that's very comfortable, that food courts are quite close to each other, they're close to home, they're close to school. No, we see that it is something like half an hour is maximum, and usually they have a quite a large volume of time when we can get there. And so that is the frequency of their meetings, less than one time a week. Now, these are the people who don't meet every week, but those who meet weekly, there's quite a large diversity. So considering it, so if we're speaking about week, we see that 1/3 part of all the teens spend their time at food courts. Why do they go there? First of all, because it's warm. Like we can see that there is a seasonal difference. Like when it's cold, food courts are more populated by teens, but when it gets warmer, they find some other places. It's a very comfortable placement and location and a very amicable atmosphere. So there are no grown-ups and the feeling that they are independent. Well, you know, 30%, that is not bad, I would say, but even that, so that's not a champion, you know, considering the necessity. And they don't go there to get acquainted. The fact that they want to find their peers, to meet their peers. So our apartments are not, you know, meant to see a large number of people coming there. And the food court is kind of the only place where a teen can do by themselves something, where can organize a meeting. And, you know, that's a very important thing. What do they do there, considering the students? They are talking. So the rest is not that important. So they are talking, or they are watching their phones or tablets, or they are making some photos, but technically and mostly they are talking to the employees, or, you know, they can play board games, listen to the music, but they don't really do that much. And considering their homework, that is quite a small group. That is a place of an intense communication. When we asked students, could you do the same at schools? And we see that 31% said that, yeah, I can imagine that. 23% said that that really happened, yeah. And there are people who said, I can't even imagine that. The possibility is quite low. So that is the smaller part, less than a half. But I would say that that is quite a good diagnosis for Moscow schools. I would say that actually half of children who come from, good families with no problems could find in their school a place for the informal communication. Well, I think that that's it, actually. So I didn't discuss some questions of how much money do they spend there, many other details, because this is quite raw data. So we haven't processed all that. We haven't interpreted all that too, surely, but I'm very grateful for the organizers that I had a possibility to discuss it. So when you discuss something, you have a better understanding of what do we have. Thank you so much, colleagues. Yeah, and we have one short question from the chat. Sorry for interrupting. I think that would take kind of 5 minutes of the coffee break. So what is the alternative so that they will have the possibility to talk? And there was a question to the youngsters, where would they really like to have that communication? So first of all, well, I didn't want to tell you about the whole research, but I'll have to, I guess. So considering our council that has taken a decision on supporting this project, we have put the headline scenario, which made our work closer to the evaluation, to the assessment for these possibilities, to see these places of communication. So for us, food court is just one of the options. Of course, there are other options is school. The third option that we have been thinking about and we managed to discuss, these are youth organizations and institutions. So that's how it's built. So the fully informal, that is food court, democratic one in youth institutions, and in school that depends really on the school. So that means that the question rests as follows. Do we really want our teenagers talk informally at school? So are we ready to solve institutional problems? Are we ready to stay there from 6 to 8 p.m.? Are we ready to provide them with cheap food there? Are we ready to let the teens to the schools which are not the pupils of this school? And I guess that is kind of the question. If we are not ready to let them in, then maybe we will understand that the food court is the platform, is a city platform where the teens live, and we will come there with the possibility to make their life there better and to think of the food that is sold there, so that city would influence the alimentation, the food that would be fast but healthy. That is the first issue to be discussed. So then, considering the youth institutions, there is also the possibility to start to be based on the children interest. So if that is a child organization, then the location question becomes a secondary one. So we have a structure that shows there are the nomads, childish organizations, and they are pedagogically a bit processed, as we may call them, and influenced by the teachers. But the questions, where do the teens find their place in Moscow? I think that we are just starting to approach which would allow us to pose a question, but not to answer to it yet. So frankly speaking, the question is too serious to answer it. We are just starting to explore and to research the issue. Yeah, that's good that you have launched the research as far as these questions of what's important to us so that we would be able to study them? Yeah, sure. And I consider that the question is as follows. A teen who's not at school, he doesn't belong to anyone. So institutionally, there is a very serious problem. So as far as the teen is at school, that is the school who is responsible for him in the Department of Education of the Moscow city. As far as the teen is on the street, in the food court, then it's not understandable who does he belong to, who is ready to solve his problems. That means he doesn't belong to anyone, and in considering the responsibility, no one is interested in him. But parents, parents, why are teens interesting at this very time? That is the emancipation period. So that is when they are leaving their nests. So the child should live through this period of living so that at 18, he would come back to his family as a grown up with a certain experience. And yeah, thank you so much. That is a very interesting report, and we suppose that your research results are more important and are bigger, and we hope that we will together study them, and we will talk about teens and how and what's and how to be responsible them, who should be responsible for them. And now we see who can help us to solve these problems. So we need experts to find a solution for such a discussion that should not last just for half an hour or even an hour. And we are passing to several questions. Well, Nikita, to you. Maybe I could ask them later a bit and you would answer to the colleagues, because this is for the roles of university in the solution for the questions that you have posed. Now we are passing to the next reporter, that is Monica Miney, development of the research ecosystem and the competences of the researchers. Well, unfortunately, so I guess that Ms. Monica, the floor is yours. You have 15-20 minutes for your report. Ms. Monica, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. I hope you can hear me as far as we can hear you. So you may start, Miss. Do you have a PowerPoint presentation? Did you send it to us?
Yes, I'm just sharing it. Can you see my screen now?
Yes. Yes, exactly. We see it.
Yes, we see the introduction slide.
Just a minute.
Perfect, thank you.
So the topic of my paper is Developing the Research Ecosystem, Reflections on the Role of Universities and Strengthening Research Competencies of the Scholars. So the research outputs produced by the universities is considered as, the stimulator or the catalyst for any nation to create space and grow in the knowledge economy. Besides harboring critical thinking and innovation, it is emphasized that research lays foundation for the teaching. Since independence, till universities in India, they were initially developed as the degree granting institution where research was at the periphery. However, in last 2 decades, the focus of policy reforms have been shifted to bridge the gap between research at universities and bringing it to the core of university teaching learning process. So in order to do this, we a thorough analysis of the system, how the research ecosystem have been developed in India in last 20 or 30 years, and what are the gaps in development of this research ecosystem is very necessary to understand the further strengthening of this system. So this paper aims to analyze the research ecosystem in India during last 20 years and would reflect upon the role of universities in strengthening the research competencies of the scholars. So let's look at the development of growth of the number of universities and colleges in India. During 2021, there were only 260 universities and 11,146 colleges in India. But by 2020, India has developed 1043 universities and 42334 colleges. In India, we have central universities which are funded by the central government. Currently, every state in India have a central university with exception of Goa, where the state itself doesn't want to have a university. We have deemed universities which are funded by government. We have deemed universities which are private, which are governed by private bodies. We have institutions of national importance, such as Indian Institute of Technology, Indian Institute of Management, Indian Institute of Science Council, and India Institute of Medical Sciences. All these institutions are research-focused institutions, and they provide technical and professional education in different areas. So we have state private universities and state public universities, which are funded by the state governments. So the research ecosystem at university means strong focus on research, which means ensuring high quality education, and it should lead to high quality and extensive PhD programs and research outputs in terms of research papers. The modern university system in India, it started with the establishment of University of Calcutta by the British. However, the purpose of these universities were only to develop human resources for the British administrative machinery in India. Although these universities were created mainly for providing education, they did have research programs, and they provided the first centers for research in India. So between 1950 and 1975, 100 universities were established in India, and some of these have research as a mission, and these includes IITs, Indian Institute of Medical Sciences, Indian Institute of Science, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, and Institute of Social Sciences, etc. And specifically Jawaharlal Nehru University and Indian Statistical Institution. This period also saw establishment of national research systems such as Indian Space Research Organization, Department of Research and Development Organization, Department of Energy, and Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. All these institutions provide a major push to research in India. However, the research output remained very low. Now, the 22nd century has seen a significant expansion in growth of university, and with these universities have research as a key mission. So some of the facts about growth of universities in India in last 2 decades is the number of IITs has expanded from 6 to 23. IIT have research as an integral part of their teaching learning process. 7 Indian Institute of Sciences have been established. In last 20 years, global ranking of universities in India have also increased because these rankings are mainly based on research performance. The focus of existing elite institutions on research has also increased. For example, in case of IIT, there were only 400 publications during the period of 1985 to 2000. However, the yearly publications jumped to 900 by 2005. And in last 5 years, the number of publications have been 1400. And in terms of Scopus publication, Scopus ranking, it suggests that in last 5 years, it has been increased to 1.88. So what do we mean by research competences? So it involves basic skills such as writing research papers and reports, designing programs and curriculum, conference presentations, networking with resources, identification of fellowship and grants, and paper competitions. And advanced skills includes technological discoveries, medical discoveries, and social discoveries for enhanced social connections and bonding between different communities. So what is the role of universities in development of research competencies? So the universities, they put knowledge to use because they use theoretical knowledge into practical implementation of knowledge and broadens the input into the creation of academic knowledge. The institutional research at universities, it leads to technological discoveries based on new knowledge, research and fundamental technological projects. The science and technology department in every Indian university have a vibrant consortium of incubation centers where ideas are allowed to germinate. The social science departments facilitate the growth of a rich body of research informed by multidisciplinary perspective. Besides the doctoral research, these departments provide opportunity to scholars to work on research projects with faculty that ranges from labor market discrimination, segregation, of housing discrimination and maternal and child care, poverty, urban poverty, ethnic prejudice, utilization, marginalization of minority communities, etc. So universities promote student exchange and faculty exchange programs within and outside the nation that expose you to opportunities and ground realities in entrepreneurship and innovation. So universities also act as the university incubation centers. They provide risk capital in the form of prototyping grant, seed funding, and venture funding to scholars to carry out their research pursuits. So universities also act as a unique place where research on different disciplines is carried out simultaneously. So they provide a great, great support and perspective to develop multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary research competency. At university, scholars also have free access to research journals and computational resources that facilitates their research. Universities also provide funding to research scholars in the form of fellowships and scholarships that gives financial support to researchers. And universities facilitate exchange programs. And universities also organize symposia in conferences, workshops, and capacity development programs for researchers that helps them to disseminate their work and also gain knowledge from others. And universities also provide platform to researchers to publish their work free of cost that helps them to develop knowledge ecosystem. And universities also train scholars in research methodologies and expose them to new research tools that enhance their research outputs. So the pandemic scenario. So pandemic provided a unique situation to research scholars in India, wherein they face several problems. So this section will highlight what were the problems faced by the research scholars in India. So first problem was limited and no access to research resources and expert supervision. And it also refers to digital disparity in India. So one of the researchers shared that due to lockdown, access to libraries, other resources, and expert supervision was almost negligible for like a period of 10 months, initial 10 months, and which was definitely going to affect her submission deadlines. It is important to note that even now several research universities in India are not open for the physical teaching learning process, and they are carrying out research teaching in digital mode only. So that has definitely impacted the face-to-face supervision of the research scholars. So there was a lost space, physical and mental. So it means that universities, they provide a unique a space for to researcher wherein they can sit peacefully and think about think about the research problem and research issue in a in-depth way, and it provides a space for critical thinking wherein they are benefited by the synergies of the research which is being carried out by their peers and other researchers. So the doctoral scholars shared that the safe space is university, and there is so much distraction at home, and like there is a problem of space in Indian urban spaces as well as rural spaces. So most of the people, like some of the people who live in 1 BHK flat, so there is no personal space to focus on research. Hence university, the importance of university in terms of providing a unique space to scholars can also be understood. So there were financial constraints faced by the research scholars that really impacted their research. There were gaps in experimental work wherein the samples were lost due to the lockdown period. And in order to bridge the gap or to strengthen the research ecosystem in India, the new education policy, which was just launched in 2020, it is in the process of implementation. It aims to enhance innovation and creativity in public universities by mentoring and supporting universities to strengthen quality of research in Indian higher education system. This policy advocates the establishment of National Research Foundation, wherein the focus would be on developing and sustaining the research ecosystem by integrating innovation and research at all levels of higher education, specifically at undergraduate level. India aims to develop 20 world-class research universities in next few years that would focus on enhancing research output by setting exemplary practices in the area of university research. So the pandemic has created unique problems and constraints, and that require collaborative efforts of government, industry, academia, and community to create a sustainable research ecosystem. So some of the suggestions are that there should be special funds allocated to support research scholars across all disciplines, and a minimum extension of 6 months should be granted with paid by the university on the fellowship. And there should be provision of counselors to research scholars, so that relieves them from mental anxiety and pressure caused due to running deadlines and financial constraints. There should be collaboration with online platforms like Zoom or Microsoft Teams that can provide a third learning space to scholars, where they can join with the academic community for writing retreats, or this may help to bring the sense of belongingness, motivation, and accountability to scholars. And there should be workshops and online courses created in collaboration with research from experts from the industries who can provide effective training to scholars to use online resources in the area of data collection, data analysis, and academic writing, especially to students from marginalized and remote area. For phased returns of university, the infrastructure should be modified according to the COVID protocols, and there should be development of cluster of research between central and state universities that can provide extension of physical as well as digital infrastructure and resources to students in rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's very interesting to see how the scientific research work is organized in your university and in your country. It would be very interesting to talk about the subjects of your research work. What kind of research do you carry out in your university? Do you carry out research about cooperation between the university and the city, about urbanism? How do you interact with the city, with the citizens? If you have some research in this topic, can we share our experience, or can we connect together your university and ours, so we can organize projects in this field? As Nikita mentioned, so we also mentioned some possibilities, some areas to development. In your university, do you have this problem of interaction between cities and citizens with the university? And if so, can you give us more details?
So my university, it's a one of a kind in whole South Asia. So my university, it focused mainly on education policy and development. So the National Institute of Education Planning and Administration, it deals with the problem of education administration and management in at all levels of education, whether it's school education, higher education, vocational education, technical education. And the professors at my university, they are involved with the policy makers. So my university, it works directly for Ministry of Higher Education in India, and we are involved with the policy documentation process of the Indian higher education system as well as school system. So the scholars at my university, university, they take up the research projects which are directly, involved with the education at ground level. So, so some of the research topics are like, student mobility. Student mobility across generations. So let's take, so one of the students, she conducted research on specifically on Indian state Bihar, which is a very educationally, you can say, marginalized state till today, and it is like very it lags in terms of education resources as well as educational output. So she conducted research on this particular state, and she found out what are the reasons why, this the intergenerational student mobility has been impacted in this particular state, and what lessons can be learned from the other state to enhance the student mobility in this particular city. So the research and some of the research works also focus on, like, women participation in the labor market. So let's say, like, what are the factors that impact women participation in the labor market in a particular city or a particular state? What are the factors? What are the provisions that can facilitate increased participation of women in city spaces? And what are the factors that impact their performance and high level of jobs? And so some other examples are like, what are the factors that impact education of students from marginalized communities in urban spaces, or let's say in elite schools. So this is how the research focus upon how, what role can education plays in development of better cities, or let's say in development of better connections among citizens in the city. So my research itself, it focus upon student voice within the university spaces, and I am looking at what is the role of university in development of informed citizens, like what role university play in development of informed citizens that can take up their citizenship responsibilities in a informed way. So I hope it like answers your question. Do you want to know something more about
Monica? Yeah, may I ask you one more question? And thank you so much for your presentation. It was very interesting, and it was mostly devoted to let's say high-level researchers. And I just wondering if you have any specific activities at your universities, or specific programs to develop research skills, not for those students who are the future researchers. Not all the students become the researchers. So, but we're discussing how important research skills are for teachers, for example. Yes, because they faced with the new situation all the time, so they need to do some not top level, not real science, but just to do some just they have to have research skill to be successful students, to be successful teachers, or successful, I don't know, hotel managers, or whatever. So do you have any specific activities on that?
Yeah, see, so in Indian universities, like now the focus has been shifted. So earlier the focus was on postgraduate and research level. So now the focus is being shifted to undergrad level, and we are focusing on creating like peer support or mentorship support to undergrad students to take up research activities. And these peers would be the postgraduate students and the research scholars. So in a way, this program will definitely provide insights to research scholars to understand, like, what is the world of research in terms of teaching, in terms of how to understand various research methodologies, and how to teach them to scholars, the budding scholars, to enhance the research competences, because expertise in different research methodologies is the first step towards taking up of research. And when you work in collaboration with the undergrad scholars, postgrad scholars, so definitely it helps you to understand what are the problems being faced, where are the areas where you are not able to understand, like how to go about carrying out research in a particular area, collection of review of literature, so there is a vast plenty of research literature available in every area, thanks to development of ICT resources. But what research is specifically very important for a specific research problem that needs to be understood. So understanding, like, in terms of work which is being cited, like, looking at, first of all, whenever you go for a Google research, so there are n number of options that open up. So how to mine mine specific research resources for your research, and then moving ahead in that direction, then conceptualizing your research methodologies, conceptualizing your research review of literature, and at a later stage, data analysis, which is very important. Like for quantitative, we have uh, like so there are many software available, and most of the universities, they provide training in use of software for quantitative research methodologies. But for the use of qualitative research methodologies, mostly the researchers used to do manual data analysis. But now there are several tools available to scholars that can really help them to do a quick data analysis, even in the area of qualitative research. So providing training to research scholars for in-depth usage of those tools that can help them to develop a comprehensive bird eye view of their research, and to disseminate their research results in a more comprehensive way. So these are the different areas wherein Indian universities are specifically focusing right now, developing the basic research competences, because the further journey of the research life is based upon these basic research competencies. And specifically in terms of academic writing, academic writing, though it's very easy to say, but when it comes to acceptance of papers for publication and writing comprehensive reports, it is being seen that most of the researchers, they struggle with writing academic writing. So the training is being provided to scholars, and to strengthen their writing skills by conducting workshops that gives them exposure to different kind of writing, like how to what is the difference between an academic essay and a research paper, and review of literature, and so on and so forth. And also for taking up the process role of paper reviewer, it's not just, so these are the areas.
Thank you so much. I think there's the other space for our collaboration. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Our plenary session is very interesting, and it gives a lot of food for thought. We're going to keep discussing this issue with our experts. For now, we need to close our session. We have only a couple of minutes before the end of the session. And I would like to thank all the participants. Thank you, Monica, very much for your presentation. Thank you. A big thank you to all the participants for their reports and for all the questions uttered. Now, a couple of minutes break. See you later.